All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our next Zath chat. We're continuing our discussion on Commander Core builds. And this time, chat, you selected Destroyer. This will be very easy because the core build for pretty much every destroyer is exactly what you see here on the right side. You start with preventative maintenance so that you don't lose your engines, your torpedoes, your guns, your rudder as often. And then you go into last stand. So if you do lose your engines, you do lose your rudder, you can still maneuver. Then you go for survivability expert because that little boost in HP really does help you live better. And then for most destroyers, you go into concealment expert because concealment expert comes in handy. So these are the core build. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the core build for just about every destroyer out there. There's a couple where we see some differences. So for the Kitakaze, what I've done is I've continued on with radio location, with adrenaline rush, with main battery and anti-air specialist, and then finally with grease the gears. Why? Well, with the Yamamoto, I get the bonus to grease the gears turret traverse, but on top of that, I'm picking out a ship that's really good for guns. Now, I did not go for IFHE, because on the Kitakaze, I automatically penetrate 30 millimeters of armor, which means I penetrate everything except for like British and French battleships, which are 32 millimeter armor. So in my opinion, there's no need for that. Now, let me pick out a different captain here. I'll just show you. Oh, wait, this is a tech tree ship. Hold on. Premium ships, destroyers, and Japanese. Yamagiri, sure, why not? So, almost every ship you're gonna want to go that way first, and then from there it's up to you. Cryo says I wouldn't run any survivability. So the thing about core builds is, when I talk about core builds, guys, this is what you start with, and that's how I would start. Any destroyer, for the most part. There's a couple exceptions. We'll get to that in a second. But any destroyer, start with that. And then you need to think about what the role of the destroyer is. If it's a torpedo-based destroyer, then of course you're going to want to buff the torpedo capabilities. Perhaps like such. Right? If it's a scouting destroyer, radio location comes in handy. And then if it's based on consumables, you know, you can do that. You can do that. If it's got a heal, for example, Superintendent's very useful. But to me, like, this is what I always start with. Radio location is not better for long-range torpedo destroyer than gunners. What do you mean by that, Neo? Radio location. So I run radio location on my Kitakaze because I want to know where to point my guns. Oftentimes, having your guns pointed in the right direction means that you will have a significant advantage once you detect that enemy destroyer. So let's think about that situation where you are face spotting. You're heading straight at the enemy destroyer. If you are doing so, you know where to point your guns. You see the destroyer sees you first because they've got a concealment advantage. Think of Yugumo or something like that. By the time they can turn and try to dodge you, you can already see them. Your guns are pointed in the right spot. Boom, they go down. So I like to use radio location on a Kitakaze. If I'm playing a torpedo build destroyer, you could use radio location as well. Although in my opinion, in my experience, radio location doesn't work well against destroyers simply because enemy battleships, if they are radio located, know to instinctively turn away. And so I find that my torpedo hits aren't as common with radio location. So if I'm playing a full torpedo boat, I might drop radio location. Might. It's up to you. Now, let's talk about a different style. Let's talk about Russian gun build. And frankly, a French gun-built destroyer can also work for this too. So let me see here. Here we go. All right. So core build, gunboat destroyer, preventative maintenance, absolutely. Last stand, absolutely. Survivability expert, absolutely. Now here's where things are different. I would not take concealment expert. I would pick something different. I would probably go with Fearless Brawler to give you that 10% reload boost. Because you want your concealment to go out as far as possible. So think about it this way. With a Gunboat Destroyer, that when you're detected, that tells you there's a ship that's nearby. And for the most part, Gunboat Destroyers work best at medium to long range. So you actually use this as an early warning system for yourself that I need to back the F off. So I like to run Fearless Brawler. Now, you could also run radiolocation. As Harley says, I typically run RPF on destroyers. I typically know I will usually have a spotting disadvantage because you kind of have an idea of where that destroyer is that's spotting you. That's not a bad pick. Alternately, you can go with Adrenaline Rush. I mean, basically, if you're a gunboat, you go for full guns, like so, right? Now, I do want to comment, I missed out on one other important skill earlier when I was talking about stealthy destroyers. So I apologize for that. Let me show you guys here. Nope, I don't want to use you. I'm going to use a flat 21 pointer. Here we go. So, here's my core build. Now, one thing you can also choose is Swift and Silence. This helps you if you are not detected. If you're playing very low concealment destroyers, then this gets you out there and gets you moving on the battlefield. This is great for American destroyers. It's also good for Japanese destroyers. So you might want to consider Swift and Silence to get that extra 8% speed. And then from there, you do your usual torpedo build, right? Like something like that. It should be okay. Radar location doesn't help you preventing getting spotted. That's correct. You know where the enemy destroyer is, but what that does grant you is it gives you the flexibility of charging that destroyer because you know where it's at. Ah, European destroyer. Let's take a look at European destroyer. Let's do Smallland. Ah, Living La Vida Loca. I only have 19 pointers, but that's okay. So, Pan-European destroyer, absolutely, core build. And then from there, you've got some choices. Now, this destroyer line is based mostly around torpedoing. Later on in the line, I think it's starting at tier 8, if not tier 9, you get a heal. So Superintendent comes in very handy simply because of that heal. So I would go survivability there. And then after that, it's mostly torpedoes that I would go for. So I would probably go first fill the tubes and Swift Fish. And you could go Liquidator. And then there's two skills. I would probably actually go for Adrenaline Rush. I think I would do a build like this for Pan-European destroyers. Because the Adrenaline Rush comes in very handy along with the torpedo boosters. So this is good for the tech tree destroyers. Now, you could also go for radio location instead if you would like to. If you do that, you could go for something like this. But I don't know if that's like the best. Hey, Teach, do you ever take a day off or are you just stuck in that mode? Taking a day off, it's kind of hard to do so. I will be taking a few days off in the future, actually, to bring you guys more Warships content. So that's going to be fun. So I did gunboats. I did Pan-European. Are there any other destroyers you guys would like me to talk about? We didn't talk about middle tier. Middle tier destroyers are a little bit different. So Turbine, for example, I'll show you guys that one. Again, core build, always. Always core build for the most part. And then from there, it's going to come down to, like the Italian, for example. They've got long-range torpedoes, relatively speaking, but they're kind of shorter. They're kind of slower, so Swift Fish comes in very handy. At lower tier, you're not so worried about radar and stuff like that, so you can play around with things. So you could go for Swift and Silence. You could also go for more of a torpedo build, but frankly, the Italian destroyers, SAP is really powerful, and so I would probably build out guns, in my opinion. British. Druid is a bad example of that. Do I not have any other premium British destroyers? Sure I do. What the heck is that? Cossack, here we go. You're stuck in that mode too? Sorry, LTZ. Here we go. Core build, British destroyer. Now, the British is interesting because the British have really good AP. So you could go for extra heavy ammunition here for AP. That's if you're really good at switching to AP or not. And then from there, I might build out to guns. Let's see. I might still want to know where enemy destroyers are nearby to me. So that might come in handy. And then, I mean, you could go grease the gears. You could go for consumable enhancements. It's up to you. Superintendent comes in handy as well because later on down the line at the top tiers, it does get a heal. So Superintendent for the heal might be very sexy. And then from there you do grease the gears. So that can work. Any other ones, chat? Unfortunately with destroyers, there's really not a lot of variation in the core build, in my opinion. Most destroyers want the same first 4 skills, and then you go from there. Rigolo, I don't have that one, Gaelic. But I could show you guys with Apollo, for example. I would do core build, absolutely, first set, boom. And then after that, you've got some choices. I would probably go Swift and Silence if you're somebody that wants to YOLO enemy battleships. I'd probably go Swift Fish to get your torpedoes even faster. It's harder for your torpedoes to be dodged. And then radio location is very handy if you're going to be on a YOLO destroyer because you want to know, is that battleship that you're lining up for the closest target? If it's not the closest target, then you need to plan accordingly. So I think that's very handy. And then after that, grease the gears, or you can go for flood chance, but you're trying to kill the ship outright. So I think grease the gears makes the more sense at that point. So this is how I would probably build my Regolo. Okay, Grunty. Yeah, Adrenaline Rush might be main battery specialist just because you're expecting to take damage. Fair enough.